Good morning, everybody. When you see me, you see economics. Today, we are going to focus on economics grade 10, and we will be looking at one of the paper 2 topics, which is South Africa's population and labor force. That is what we are going to look at today. I hope everybody is well, and you'll all be with me in this presentation. And I hope that at the end of this lesson, you shall have understood what the population and the labor force of South Africa is all about. Okay, without much ado, let's start with the presentation. That is our topic today, South Africa's population and labor force. And like I said, this is economics grade 10. It is under the broad topic economic pursuits. So which means this topic you find it in paper 2. But remember, this year we're not going to write paper 1 and paper 2 because of what has happened, because of the time that we have lost in our school due to the pandemic, COVID-19. Therefore, there is a directive from Department of Basic Education that only one paper must be written for grade 10 and for grade 11. And your grade 10 paper, which will consist of all the topics, depending on what your school has covered so far, it will be out of 80 marks. But it will be topics of paper 1 and paper 2 in the same paper. So that is what you can expect. So those of you who have covered this particular topic, I think it will be beneficial for you to go through this topic with me. Okay, let's start. South Africa's population and labor force. Now, firstly, I need to tell you that South Africa's population, as we speak now, is estimated at about 59.62 million in the year 2020. This was recently conducted by Statistics South Africa in their mid-year population estimates. Right. For more information on South Africa's population, you can go to www.statsa.gov.za. That is where you can find more about South Africa's population and what Statistics South Africa is actually doing when they estimate the population. So we are a nation of about almost 60 million. It means our population has grown to 60 million. Right. Okay. Now, there is what we call population growth. Population growth, it's influenced by a number of factors. One of the factors that influences population growth, you know what growth is when the population number increases. So the population growth is influenced, or it is determined by, number one, fertility rate. Fertility rate basically means the birth rate. And then the second factor that determines the population growth, or that influences the population growth, is mortality rate. Mortality rate is the death rate. The next factor that influences population growth is immigration. You must be careful of that. Immigration, I-double-M-I, immigration. This is about the number of people coming into the country from other countries. When people come from other countries to settle in South Africa, we say they have immigrated. So immigration is all about the number of people coming to the country from other countries. And then the other one factor that influences the growth of the population would be immigration. Immigration, the number of South Africans living in South Africa permanently. That is immigration. So these are the factors that determine the population growth rate of South Africa. For us to move from 48 million, because I think in 2017, South Africa's population was estimated at 48 million. But now, this year, in this particular quarter, 2020, the last quarter, South Africa's population is estimated to be 59.62 million. Right. So all these factors that we have looked at, fertility, mortality, immigration, these are the factors that has led us to be at 59.62 million, because it clearly shows from 48 to 59.62, that's growth of the population. So these are the factors that have caused our population to grow to almost 60 million. Now, we have what we call natural growth rate of the population, which means when we talk about the natural growth of the population, here we are looking at the difference between the birth rate and the death rate. Remember, the birth rate is the fertility rate and the death rate is the mortality rate. So we set off the two together in order to get the difference. That difference, if it is positive, it will give us the natural growth of the natural growth rate of the population. So the natural growth rate of the population is the difference between the birth rate and the death rate. I think this is just very easy stuff. So South Africa's population growth rate, as we speak, it is estimated at 2.7 percentage point per annum. And we are regarded to be among the highest in the world in terms of population growth rate. Remember, our economy is it's growing at less than 1%. The last time our economy was growing. I know we've had some recessions in a number of quarters this year and in 2019. So, and you know, the fact that if the population growth rate is faster than the economic growth rate, then you must know that the economy or the country, it's in danger, it's in a threat of being a poor country. So as we speak at the moment, our population is growing faster than our economy, because our population is estimated to be growing at 2.7, but our economy is growing at less than 1%. So the growth rate of the population is caused by the following factors. Number one, we have touched on this, is the high fertility rate associated with rural areas. Like I said, fertility rate refers to the birth rate, the rate at which South Africans are having babies. That's the fertility rate. So it is said that our fertility rate in South Africa is very high, and this fertility rate is associated with people in the rural areas. So it seems as if the birth rate in the rural areas of the country is very high. So that is one of the causes of our population growth rate. The other factor that caused population growth rate is this one: unacceptable status of women in society. There are certain cultures in the country that have not accepted the women as equal partners. They have not accepted that women can do the same job that men are doing. They have not accepted that women can be career women. They still believe that women need to be housewives. They need to nurture and raise children at home and to be at home. They don't have to have a profession. They don't have to work. There are, unfortunately, we still have got those cultures in our country that exist. They still don't want to accept the new status of women who can go and work and earn a living for their families. So that is one of the reasons that causes the population to grow. The other reason is the high levels of poverty. We are one of the countries where poverty is very, very high. And it stands at about 40% people who live in poverty. And to live in poverty, the way it is measured throughout the world by the World Bank and other development organizations, they look at the earnings per day of a household. Now they equate it to $1. Now $1, it's almost it could be around 16 to 17 rand. So if you live below 17 rand a day, then we say you are in absolute poverty. So poverty is one of those factors that cause population of the country to grow. And then here's another factor: lack of access to education. This one goes hand in hand with that one, unacceptable status of women in society, because some cultures still believe that women do not need to be educated. They need to stay at home and have babies and raise them. So that's why they don't send their girl children to school. And it's not only girl children who do not have access to education, but in certain rural areas we still have this problem where children do not have access to education, even though the government is trying its best to make sure that education is accessible to all South Africans, irrespective of where they reside, in rural areas or in urban areas. And they have made a great stride as far as education is concerned. But lack of education, lack of access to education can also lead to the growth of the population. Because if you don't go to school, what will you do at home? Your guess is as good as mine. And then the other one is child labor. Because of all these other problems, lack of education, poverty, children are forced to go and work. And child labor in South Africa is illegal. If you employ a child to work for you, it's illegal. You will be arrested. You are violating the laws of the country. That shouldn't happen. The other one is lack of family planning. You know what is family planning? We refer to it as Planned Parenthood, where two parents plan a family. They can plan to have 2 children or can plan to have 3 children. But this needs education. So a lot of our people needs to be educated that you have to plan the size of your family. Because remember, you need to look at your resources, the income that you earn, so that you can plan properly and accurately for your family. Because we don't want your family to suffer. You don't want your family to live in poverty because you cannot provide for them. So these are the factors that are responsible for the increase in the growth rate of the population of South Africa. Right, let's continue. Why is population growth rate undesirable? Why do we have a problem with a population that is continuously growing? Like our population in South Africa that is growing at 2.7. Why is that a problem? I've already told you now that our population is growing faster than our economy, and that signals a problem to the South African government, because we may not be able to have resources for everybody. Remember the government plans, but the minute the population outpaces the economic growth, then it means the resources of the country will not be sufficient for everybody who lives in the country. So why is it an undesirable thing, this population growth rate? It is because if the population is bigger than or it's high, it will put pressure on the country's scarce resources. those of you, you have just been introduced to economics in grade 10, and you know that one of the concepts in economics, one of the problems in economics is that the resources to satisfy or to fulfill our wants are limited. Those resources are limited. And as compared to the wants, our wants are unlimited. You can never reach a point where you say you can satisfy all your wants. So when you compare your wants with your resources, the resources will always be limited. So that's why your resources needs to be used wisely, prudently, by allocating them to your most basic needs before you look at other level of needs. Right. So population growth rates are undesirable because they will put pressure on the country's scarce resources. Secondly, when the population grows, it will make it difficult for government to provide social services. Social services such as healthcare, education, municipal services, and social grants that we have now. If the population grows suddenly without the revenue of the government growing, you can imagine what's going to happen. The government will not be able to pay the child support grant. The government will not be able to pay a disability grant because the resources are scarce. And the other one is the provision of infrastructure. The government is responsible to provide schools, to provide hospitals, to provide roads, to provide early childhood development centers. But if the population grows beyond or above the revenue that the government makes, then that's a problem. The government will not be able to provide all these amenities for everybody. The parks, they will not be able to provide for such. When new areas develop, like the informal settlement, sanitation, sewage must be installed in those areas. Water must be installed in that area, and roads must be made proper in those areas, in those informal settlements. But if the population grows faster than the economy, then it will be difficult for the government to provide such infrastructure. Then the other reason why we do not really favor high population growth rate is that it leads to an increase in the labor force, which is something not necessarily negative. When we talk about the labor force, we refer to what you know as the economically active population. So when the population of the country increases, then that particular section of the population, which is known as the economically active population, it will also grow, right? And when we have a growth in the economically active population, then the consumer demand will also increase. And what is the advantage of an increase in the consumer demand? That gives us economic growth. When the demand of goods and services in the country increases, that will lead to economic growth. So this factor, it is not necessarily a negative factor, but it is also the reason why population growth rate is undesirable. Now, when we talk about the economically active population, this is a population of people who are able and who can provide their services of labor, who are available to be employed. And normally they are the people between the ages of 15 and 64. That is what economically active population means. But from the very same economically active population, there are groups of people who are not part of the economically active population. I can think of groups of people such as people who are sick, children. I can also think of students and learners, because these people are not working, and they cannot work because they still developing their careers. And also those who are on pension are not able to be employed. Right, so these are the people, groups of people who are not included in the economically active population. Let's go on and look at the next process that I want to explain to you, and that process is known as urbanization. Urbanization, from the word urban, you know, we have rural and urban. Urban, it's places like cities, towns, you know, that's urban. Now, when you talk about urbanization, this is the process where the population in urban areas increases as a result of migration. Migration basically means the movement of people from one area to the other. So it would be migration of people from rural areas to urban areas. So that is what we call migration, the process where population in urban areas increases as a result of migration from rural areas to urban areas. Now, in South Africa alone, just above 50% of South Africa's population reside in urban areas. So which means the population in rural areas is becoming less and less, because people are moving from rural areas to urban areas. That's why it says here South Africa is being urbanized at about 50%. The reason why people are moving from rural areas to urban areas, they can be classified into two categories. The first is the pull factors. Pulling, or the pull factor, we call it pull factors because they attract people to the cities. You know, the cities are so attractive such that they attract or they pull people towards them from rural areas. And some of the reasons that pull people to the cities, that brings people or that attracts people to the cities, are economic opportunities. When you look at the economic opportunities that are available in the urban areas and those that are available in the rural areas, you'll agree with me that in rural areas, the economic activities are very, very less as compared to economic activities in the urban areas. That's why people are moving, because they cannot get jobs in rural areas because of very few economic activities. That's why they move to urban areas where there is a concentration of economic activities, which will make it possible for people to get employed there. So because of economic opportunities, people move to cities and towns. The other reason is because of a better infrastructure in cities and towns as compared to those in rural areas. Those of you who are still in rural areas, you'll know what I mean. When you visit the city or the town, you'll see that the rural area and the city and the town are very different in terms of their development. And then we've got another category of factors we refer to it as the push factors. These are the factors that will drive people out of rural areas to urban areas. These are the factors. Lack of economic opportunities. They don't exist in rural areas, but they exist in urban areas. And then you have lack of infrastructure. There is no infrastructure in rural areas, but there is infrastructure in urban areas. Right, so these are the pull factors that pulls people to the cities, and the push factors that push people out of, or that drives people out of the rural areas. in order to go and look for better economic opportunities. Now let's continue to explore this topic further. Now I want to continue to look at the next. It looks like my screen has frozen. Let me just continue to get it right. Yes, it's okay now. Now let's talk about South Africa. What makes people to come to South Africa? And as you observe what happens in our country, we observe that many foreigners, especially from our continent, are attracted to South Africa, right? So migration does not only happen within South Africa from rural to urban areas, but it also happens throughout the world. That's why we have many foreigners in our country, most of whom come from the African continent. And we know that they are attracted to our country by better economic opportunities and infrastructures. So normally when people move from one area to the other, they are looking for better economic opportunities, and they are also looking for better infrastructure. That's the main reason that makes people to be attracted to other areas. Now, we also have amongst us the so-called illegal immigrants. Those who have moved from their countries to South Africa, but not legally. They have not really entered with the proper documentation and through the borders, through our customs, etc. They have not really used proper channels to come, or legal channels to come into the country. We call them illegal immigrants. And in South Africa alone, these illegal immigrants are estimated to be at 8 or more million. So that's how many foreigners you can find in South Africa. Now, the quantity and the quality of the labor force. You know, when we talk about the labor force, we are actually talking about the economically active population, the population. We are talking about the labor of the country, which consists of people who are working and who are still looking for employment. So the quantity, it means the number, the number of the labor force, as well as the quality of the labor force, determine the growth as well as the success of the country. When we've got skilled labor force, then the country will be able to benefit from skilled labor, and the country will be able to achieve success as compared to unskilled labor. If there's labor, it's unskilled, then there's nothing really that the country can benefit from. It's because unskilled labor mostly would be concentrated on manual jobs, you know, of digging trenches, you know, but we need skill like engineering skill, we need specific skills that will make the economy to grow. So if we don't have those skills, then our economy will not grow and our country will not achieve success. Now let's talk about the economically active population, or EAP. This refers to the proportion of the population that is between the ages of 16 and 65. You know, it depends on a country. Some say it's between the ages of 14 or 15 and 64. Now, here in South Africa, we put brackets of 16 years of age and 65 years of age, which means you can start working from the age of 16, 17, and at the age of 65 you must retire. So we call people who fall within this age bracket, they are part of the economically active population. Why? Because they have a potential to be employed, as long as they have the necessary skills. They can be employed as long as they fall within this age bracket of 16 and 65. Right, now let's continue to explore the topic further. Right, I'm still trying to get it to work again. Yes, there it is. And then we say the economically active population consists of people who can be employed. But you know that we have people who are still unemployed in the country. The number of people who are unemployed, they indicate to us the level of unemployment in the country. So when we talk about an unemployed person, what type of a person is unemployed? It is someone who is part of the economically active population, which means this person is between the ages of 16 and 65 and would like to be employed. This person is actually looking for employment actively and is willing to work. If such person cannot find a job, then we say this person is unemployed. Right. I hope that is clear. And then we're talking about the unemployment rate. This is the percentage of the economically active population that is actively looking for employment but is unable to find work. So that figure gives us the unemployment rate as a percentage of the EAP. If, for instance, we have about 1 million people in the economically active population, and about 100,000 of them cannot find employment, then we say our unemployment rate is 10%. Because 100,000 out of 1 million cannot find employment. They are unable to find employment, even if they are willing and they are actively looking for employment. But the fact that they cannot find employment, it gives us the unemployment rate. The unemployment rate in South Africa stands at about 30% as we speak, and that is amongst the highest in the world. And job creation in South Africa remains an important priority for the government. So when you look at the unemployment rate in South Africa, it is stubbornly high at a rate of 30% or more, because sometimes statistics are not necessarily reliable, or they are not a true reflection of what is happening, because there are those people who were looking for employment for quite a number of years until they reach a stage where they say, I give up, I don't want to go and look for employment because there are no employment opportunities in the country. So those are people who are discouraged to look for employment. So their numbers are not included in the unemployment rate numbers. Right. So it is a challenge for every government to solve the unemployment rate as high as this one in South Africa. High unemployment rate, it is caused by the following. We have this high unemployment rate in the country and almost everywhere in the world because of the following reason. Excuse me. Number one is because of the rapid population growth. I said earlier in the presentation that the population is growing at a fast rate, actually faster than the economy. and that leads to a high level of unemployment. The second reason, there is lack of appropriate training, there is lack of education and lack of skills. If people cannot acquire, basic education and basic skills and basic training, then they cannot be employed. They are unemployable. So that is one of the problems that cause our population, our unemployment rate to be as high as it is now. The second one is a decrease in the labor-intensive production techniques. Now, because the world is advancing, more technology is being developed and is being made available even to underdeveloped countries. Now we speak of robotics. Robots are now almost are doing everything that a human being can do. When that happens, it means our production techniques are being substituted from being labor intensive, where we only, when we say this labor intensive, it means we do the production using people mostly. But when we replace people with the technology, we are becoming capital intensive. So when the labor intensive production techniques decreases and the capital intensive techniques increases, then this will definitely result in some of the employees, some of the workers to be laid off, and that will also contribute to the high unemployment rate. Right, I want to finish these factors and then I will take a break and then we'll come back and continue. Low economic growth rate, it's another factor that results in a high unemployment rate. When the economy is not growing, when the population is increasing, we are bound to have the level of our unemployment increasing. And the economy again is not able to create new jobs. We have almost every year more than 500,000 of our matriculants finishing school. And we know that is a fact that not all of them can be accommodated in our institutions of higher learning because of money and because of the quality of their results. But it is difficult for them to be absorbed in the labor market because the economy fails to create new jobs for new entrants into the labor market. Right, I want us to take a short break. When we come back, we'll continue with the subject of South Africa's population and labor force. Welcome back, grade 10 learners. Today we have actually explored the topic South Africa's population and labor force. So far we have looked at a number of concepts under this particular topic, which is a paper 2 topic under the broad topic contemporary economic issues. So we have defined what economically active population is. We have looked at the South African's population number, which is estimated at 59.67 million as compared to the year 2017 when the last census were taken. That indicates to us that the population of South Africa has grown. And then we have also looked at a concept, population growth rate, specifically the natural growth rate. And we have seen that the natural growth rate of the population is actually the difference between the birth rate and the death rate. And then we've also looked at the factors that determines or that influences the population growth rate. And they are the following. We've looked at the death rate or mortality rate is one of the factors that determines the population growth rate. The birth rate or the fertility rate is one of the factors that influences the population growth rate. We have looked at immigration. Immigration is when the people from other countries come to South Africa, come to settle in South Africa. That's immigration. That also has an influence on the growth of the population. And we also have the fourth and the last one, which is immigration, when South Africans move out of the country to go and settle in another country. So those are just some of the things that we have looked at so far. And we defined what the economically active population is. It is a proportion of the population that consists of people between the ages of 16 and 65 who are employable. And then we also refer to a number of people, a group of people who are not part of the economically active population, like your learners, your students, your sick people or disabled people or handicapped people, because they are unemployable. They cannot be employed. That's why they are excluded from the economically active population. And then we talked about South Africa's labor force, which consists of the economically active population. Now, before we went for the break, we looked at some of the factors. Let's just look at some of these factors again. We looked at some of the factors that caused the unemployment rate in South Africa to be as high as it is now. And we said the unemployment rate in South Africa stands at about 30%. And we are amongst the highest in the world in terms of unemployment, right? And we looked at the unemployment rate, which is a percentage of the economically active population that is actively looking for work but is unable to find employment. And then those factors that caused unemployment rate, very briefly we have looked at them, but I just want to look at them again. It's a rapid population growth rate leads to high level of unemployment. Lack of appropriate training, education and skills also lead to high level of unemployment or the highest rate of unemployment. Decreasing the labor intensive production techniques and a greater use of capital goods. When we replaced our workers with technology, that leads to high levels of unemployment. When the economy is not growing, or when the economy is growing very, very slow like the South African economy, but the population is growing faster than the economy, that also leads to high rates of unemployment. When the economy is unable to create new jobs, the unemployment rate will keep on increasing. Now let's move on and look at the next, which is still on South Africa's labor force and population. Now, it is estimated that about 20% of South Africa's population is infected with HIV and AIDS epidemic. When it's an epidemic, it's still it's not as intense as a pandemic like coronavirus. Coronavirus is referred to as pandemic because it is more intense and it is global. But the ones that is not as intense as coronavirus is known as an epidemic. So 20% of the population of South Africa is infected with HIV and AIDS. So this is one of the disease that can have a negative impact on the population and as a result on the labor force, because it can infect those who are working and those who are not working. Right. Okay. So HIV and AIDS can have dire consequences or dire effects or severe effects on the economy because of the following reasons. It can decrease drastically the labor force or the economically active population, because more and more people who are working will be dying because of HIV. So it means the labor force of the country will decrease drastically because of that. Secondly, it can also decrease, it can lead to a decrease in the number of consumers, leading to a decrease in the consumer demand of goods and services. So when more people from the population dies, when more people from the population die, then it will lead to a drop in the consumer demand of goods and services. And when the demand of goods and services decreases in the economy, then the economy is not growing. The economy is decreasing. There is no economic growth, basically. HIV can cause or can put pressure or can put strain on the country's healthcare. Like we've seen what coronavirus is doing now. It has put quite a lot of strain on the country's healthcare. That's why the country needed a lockdown, a very hard lockdown at level 5, so that the country can prepare for the rapid spread of this coronavirus. If there is this rapid spread, then the country could do something about it. All right. Now, it can also put pressure on social services as well as infrastructure. Not only will HIV put pressure or put a strain on the country's healthcare, but it can also put pressure on the social services as well as infrastructure that the country is providing. Okay, I think we are done with that. Now, I would like us to look at some of the questions, the possible questions that you may find in the question paper addressing this specific topic of South Africa's population and labor force. And the first question is a question on the extract. We call it a data response question. You may get a question like this one. Normally a question like this one carries 10 marks. Like for instance, in this one we have an extract here. The question would say on top there, read the following extract and answer the questions that follow. Now let's look at the topic of this extract. It says migrants flock to Gauteng. This information is taken from statssa.gov.za. Now let's read the extract together. It says people migrate for a number of reasons. These can be categorized under economic, social, political, cultural, or environmental. These categories also relate to what is known as push or pull factors. Remember, we've talked about those factors earlier. The economic strength of Gauteng relates to the pull factors. Because people are moving to Gauteng, so we say that it pulls people to it. These factors that influence its attractiveness to migrants. Gauteng receives the highest number of in-migrants for the period of 2016 to 2019. Better economic opportunities, jobs, and the promise of a better life are some of the factors that make Gauteng an attractive destination. Right? We've read the extract. Let's look at the questions. Can we now look at the questions? There we have 5 questions. As you can see, questions based on an extract. Normally the first 2 would be 1 mark and 1 mark each. And then number 3 would be 2 marks. Number 4 would be 2 marks. And the last one would be 4 marks. The way these questions have been, they've been arranged. They've been arranged from the simplest to the most difficult, as you can see. The first two are almost simple. The second two are a little difficult than the first two, and the last one, that's why it carries 4 marks. It's not as simple as the others. Now, the first question says, identify one reason for people to move from rural to urban areas. That's question number 1. Question number 2, which institution is responsible for publishing population figures? Number 3, briefly describe the term urbanization. Normally in your the third question of the data response, you'd be required to describe the concept. And then question number 4, what is the impact of HIV on the South African labor force? And then 1.5, what problems are associated with overpopulation? Let's go and answer the first question. 1.1, identify one reason for people to move from rural to urban areas. According to the extract, when you go back to the extract, you can see in the extract there, they give you reasons for people to move from their place to Gauteng. Now let's look at the response to the question. Right. For question number 1, the reasons are as follows: better economic opportunities, jobs, and promise for a better life. So these are the reasons that attracts people to Gauteng. So any one of those 3 will give you 1 mark. Right, so these are the reasons for people to move from rural to urban areas. Question number 2, which institution is responsible for publishing population figures? It's Statistics South Africa, Stats SA, also 1 mark. And then question number 3 required you to describe the term urbanization. So what is urbanization? It is the process whereby the population of urban areas increases as a result of migration. So that is our definition of urbanization. When we go back again to 1.4 and look at what the question is saying, what is the impact of HIV on the South African labor force? What effects will HIV have on the South African labor force? Here is the response. HIV may lead to a decrease in the economically active population. So there will be a decrease in the EAP, that's one fact. It will lead to a decrease in the number of consumers, causing a drop in the demand, so that's the second point. And it will put a strain on the country's healthcare and social services infrastructure. So these are the points. Any one of them will get 2 marks. And then the last question says, what problems are associated with overpopulation? Why is underpopulation undesirable? Because of the following reason: it puts pressure on a country's resources and it makes it difficult for the government to provide social services as well as infrastructure. Okay, so you see now how we answer a data response question. You must always be relevant and you must always know your concept for you to be able to answer questions like this. This question carries about 10 marks, and in one question of your section B, because in your section B, if you have a choice of 2 questions, but let me tell you, out of 40 marks, out of 1 question of 40 marks in your section B, 2 questions are data response question. It can be your 2.2 as well as your 2.3. So it would be 10 plus 10, which is 20. So the remaining questions would represent about 50% of the 40 marks. But only 50%, 20 marks, is for 2 data response questions. So make sure that you do well in these data response questions. Okay, Let's look at the next question. The next question says here, these are typical questions that you may get in your paper. This one also part of section B, especially let's say it's question 2. It will start with 2.1.1, which says list any two factors determining the population. The factors that influence the population. Those factors are, number 1, fertility rate. We've talked about it. Number 2, mortality rate or deaths. Number 3, immigration, the number of people coming into South Africa from other countries. And the last one, emigration, number of South Africans leaving South Africa permanently. So these are the factors influencing the population. Let's look at another question. I think it's almost the same as this one, which says list. You just list without discussing. List any two groups of people excluded from the economically active population. I told you that economically active population exclude a certain groups from being part of the economically active population. So which are those groups? Number 1, handicapped and ill people because they cannot work. Learners, they are at work, they are at school, they are not supposed to work. Students are also still busy with their studies, they cannot go and work. Housewife and voluntary and those who are doing voluntary work because they are working without compensation. Right. Let's look at another question. This is a question that you can also get in section B for 2 marks, but where you need to use your knowledge to answer a question like this one. How are population numbers obtained? Right? This one does not say list. This one wants you to explain how can population numbers be obtained. Right? Now, this is how the country can obtain population numbers. By using census. What is census? Census refers to the counting of people in a country. Or it can be obtained through population surveys. Right, so this is how you answer a question like this one for 2 marks. We say it's a middle order question, but that is moderate, not as simple as the one that says list 2 factors determining the population. Okay, and then we have arrived at the end of our presentation for today, which was on South Africa's population and labor force. And it is my hope and belief that after this or after watching this lesson, you now understand the topic better, and you won't even miss a question, or you won't even get one question wrong that is based on South Africa's population and labor force. Now, I'm going to end it here and say good luck to all of you. Prepare thoroughly and go and write and get your pass so that next year you are in the next grade. Thank you very much.